Okay, so this week we're gonna hang out in us with a psalm, Psalm 62. Um, I know some people had requested um, to kind of see the text beforehand, so you could take your own time to look at it. So have you guys seen that those have been in the emails? Um, I don't love this idea overall because I don't actually want you guys checking all the BS things I say. I just want you to assume that I'm telling you the gospel truth. Um,
Okay.
so so I'll give it to you beforehand, but don't read it. I want you guys just to go on my authority rather than reading it for yourself and thinking for yourself. We don't do that. We're all about authority here at Wayfarers, right?
So did you send an email out? Did I miss it?
I did.
Oh,
Yeah,
I guess I did. Okay.
we may
It
have
was
blacked
with
them. What's up?
it was with the
Oh, okay.
video. Yeah, it was at the very bottom.
Okay.
Yeah, it's always down there. So we're in Psalm 62 this week. So
Okay.
I will
Well,
read
thank
it to you. So Holly and I were discussing with the women's group. You guys just did the Psalms as well, and we were talking about. Did you guys kind of talk about the different types or divisions of Psalms? And it sounds like yes, but you guys got a little more specific. So I wanted to. Most of the stuff I read said there's really kind of three big categories of Psalms, and they call them different things, but in general, there's kind of your praise Psalms. One's talking about how great God is and different aspects of God. There's the lament, which is a very specific form of asking God to intervene because the situation, life kind of stinks. And then there's another one that there's a lot of different names for, but it's kind of a combo of the two. And it's sometimes you hear it called like the Psalms of reorientation. It kind of starts out with a complaint or a dark place like a psalm, but then by the end, they've kind of worked it out with God. They're kind of at a new place spiritually. And the kind of implication is, I was here in my relationship with God and this bad thing happened. It could have kind of sent me down, or it can kind of help me reorient. So you hear lots of different words for those. So the psalm we're going to look at, Psalm 62, is a psalm of confidence. So each of those kind of big three I just described has several kind of sub genres, and I think that's what the women went through with a lot of theirs, different types of the subgenres of those. And so I see that this one, everyone kind of agrees, oh, good, a psalm of confidence. So my thought was, of course, oh, obviously this is a psalm of praise, right? And interestingly, it's not. The psalms of confidence are a subgenre of laments. They are structured the same way. They are a lot of things, and they're actually technically laments, which I thought was interesting. A song of confidence actually comes out of a lament, out of difficult circumstances, which tells us that this psalm of confidence is not showing confidence in circumstances, right? Because laments are done when we're mourning something, when things are not right. But psalms of confidence come at us based on our trust and who we are. And I think we'll see that very strongly in this psalm as well. So my kind of two kind of controlling metaphors, the main ways I was thinking about this psalm as we looked at it were, well, this week, poor kid, I think stress of school starting or something, has just had a lot of nightmares this week. And I was just thinking about what happens in the middle of the night when we have a nightmare, right? We go running in there. And what we're looking for more than anything is, I think, the reassurance, the reminder that, mom or dad is there, that things are actually okay. The thing that I was afraid of isn't real. We're looking to kind of reconnect and remember what is actually true. And so if that metaphor is helpful for you, I thought of just kind of that middle of the night when we're wanting comfort of being reminded of things we already know. The other kind of metaphor I had is I'm pretty sure everyone here is going to know that I'm bipolar, or that I've been diagnosed as bipolar at some time in the past. And one of the things I really have had to learn, one of the things I had to work with a lot in kind of my early days of that diagnosis, was recognizing that the way I feel is not the way the world actually is. I'm having a bad day, I'm down in the dumps. That does not mean everything is wrong in the world for everyone and everything. Just like when I'm having a good day, when I'm euphoric, it does not mean all things are right with the world, right? Those are feelings, those are lenses and perceptions I have. And so kind of a lot of the self-talk, a lot of the therapy I had to do early on was talking through using my brain, not just my feelings all the time, right? The world is not my perception always. I have to remind myself that there's more going on than just the way I feel at the moment. And so those were kind of, whether it's, crazy person self-talk, whether it's just childlike fear that needs to be comforted. I see that there are times we need to reconnect. We need to be told what the truth is because the situation doesn't feel like it. So those were kind of, I guess, the lenses, the biases I had going into this Psalm 62. Any thoughts before I kind of read it?
Who is the author of this psalm?
David.
It's a David Psalm. And this one is one of the ones that I think some of them are disputed if they were written, for David or to him or part of a clan. This one I think is one of the ones that there's not a lot of dispute. David probably wrote this one himself. So I'll start on verse 2 because verse 1 just simply says, for the lead player on Jehudanuth, which is likely someone's name. It's a style of singing that Jehudanuth did. It's a David psalm. Only in God is my being quiet. From him is my rescue. Only he is my rock and my rescue. I shall not stumble at all. How long will you demolish a man, commit murder, each one of you, like a leaning wall, a shaking fence? Only from his high place they schemed to shake him. They took pleasure in lies. With their mouths they blessed, and inwardly they cursed. Selah. Only in God be quiet, my being, for from him is my hope. Only he is my rock and my rescue, my fortress. I shall not stumble. From God is my rescue and glory, my strength's rock and my shelter in God. Trust in him at all times, O people. Pour out your hearts before him. God is our shelter. Selah. Only breath, humankind. The sons of man are a lie. On the scales altogether they weigh less than a breath. Do not trust in oppression, and of theft have no illusions. Though it bear fruit of wealth, set your heart not upon it. One thing God has spoken, two things have I heard, that strength is but God's, and yours, Master, is kindness, for you requite a man by his deeds. So kind of digging in, we hear a couple of different times in here, David actually speaking to himself, his own soul, his own inner being. And we get that right away at that second verse. Only in God is my being quiet. From him is my rescue. Only he is my rock and my rescue. I shall not stumble at all. I think that verses in here, I shall not stumble, he's going to be my rescue. There are certain theological streams that like to pull those out of context and just say, oh, that proves that nothing bad is ever going to happen to you. If God, if you really pray enough, if you really are, nothing bad will ever happen to you. And they take verses like this and say, see, nothing can ever bad happen to you. To which my response would simply be, why don't you read the rest of the psalm, right? He's talking to himself here because circumstances are not great. They're not awesome. And this phrase and kind of variations on it, we'll see a couple times in here. This seems to be kind of the core kernel of what he is praying, where his mind is wandering, noting that David is largely talking to other people. He doesn't actually talk directly to God until the very end in the psalm. He's talking to himself. It's that self-talk. He's reminding himself of these truths he already knows. No, it's God that's going to save me. God is my rescue. Not because the circumstances are going to be magically fixed, but because I trust God. And I just think that is so, so key to knowing this. I think this phrase is one that, like many true biblical statements, it's really easy to get our head around that. Yeah. I won't trust anything else, right? I trust God. God's going to take care of me. But like just knowing that in our souls, our heart of hearts, our core, when circumstances say otherwise. I mean, that's a lifetime of spiritual work, right? It's easy to understand the idea. No, I trust God, not those other things. No, I trust God, not my bank account, not my relationships, not my skills, not the hard work I've done, et cetera, right? That theme is going to run through this psalm as well. No, in my soul, in my heart of hearts, I trust that God is the one who's going to come through for me. I just wonder how different our lives might look, how different our churches, our communities, our world would look if we really believed that. If at our core we knew it was going to be okay, that God is the only place we're going to find satisfaction, that God is the only place we're going to find quiet. Just something, again, like David's doing here, to remind ourselves of. So in verse 4, we actually kind of get into the circumstances. We get to hear a little bit about why David is needing to remind himself of this. And here he's not talking to himself or to God. He's talking to people who are after him. And he's kind of a taunt in some ways. How long are you going to demolish a man, commit murder, each one of you? Like a leaning wall, a shaking fence, unstable. Only from his high place they schemed to shake him. They took pleasure in lies. With their mouths they blessed, and inwardly they cursed. So I do want to remind us that unlike a lot of the things that we sometimes will whine about and feel overwhelmed by and feel like is dangerous to him, David here was actually facing life-threatening situations, right? This was not a game. This was not inner work for him. If God did not come through for him in many, many life situations, he would die. He would actually literally die, and God came through for him again and again. In David's life, really everything that went wrong came from him, right? God came through, despite the fact he did have almost constant oppression from other people in his life. There's an interesting here, this probably comes from the fact when he was a king, this is probably people kind of scheming against him during later in his life, maybe Absalom's rebellion or something, because we hear him talking about kind of these petty people that just want to tear someone down, right? They are trying to tear him down. And how long you can demolish someone, pull them down from their high place and scheming. And I enjoyed just this kind of theme of David's, this constant annoyance at kind of the like deception, the backstabbing, right? David was a warrior. At the end of the day, he probably preferred, fighting his enemies face to face. He's not in a place like that anymore. He's the king. And so people aren't going to come head to head with him. They're going to whisper behind his back. They're going to smile in his face and stab him in the back, right? Mm-hmm. And you just hear this frustration with David. Like, I just wish people wouldn't do it. And which is another, just the deceptiveness, the lies, just drove him crazy. And that theme will come back kind of a little later on in the psalm as well. So after kind of looking at that, after this taunt of these people who think they're all that, he says, again, only in God be quiet my being, for from him is my hope. Only he is my rock and my rescue, my fortress, I shall not stumble. For God is my rescue and my glory, my strength's rock and my shelter in God. I think it's interesting here that David is going back to these very personal images. I love one of David's favorite metaphors for God seems to be this cleft in the rock, this shelter, this safe place. Which again would have been a very literal image for him. He spent a good chunk of his life hiding in caves. The cleft, the high place. When you're standing up on top of a cliff, the bad guys can't get at you. And that, in a lot of ways, became a very personal image for David, a way of relating to God. He knew God was his shelter, his cleft. And we talked a few weeks ago about what are some of our personal images for God, our ways of connecting with God. That image is one that's probably not that literal for him anymore, right? He's the king. He's established. It's sneakiness that he's dealing with right now. People trying to tear him down without literally hunting him, like happened earlier. And yet in this moment when he needs to remind himself of these deeper truths, he's kind of going back to his roots, right? These metaphors, these images that are powerful. And I think it's teaching us kind of an important technique when we are struggling, when we need to remind ourselves of God's goodness, that he is our shelter, not these other things. It's good to reconnect with those things that, made us first fall in love with Jesus and the gospel, going back to our roots and understanding like, that's okay. It's even desirable. David is still, as this big bad king, he knows deep down inside, he's kind of this scared boy who's on the run, who's hiding in caves, wondering if he's going to live through the night, right? God was there for him then. I suspect he'll be there for me now. He's reaching back into his roots. He's finding these kind of comforting ways of thinking about God. He's reconnecting, which I just think is so important. He then turns on his audience again, except this time, instead of being the people who are after him, attacking him, he's kind of opening up his heart and his life and saying, people, I need you to join me in this. The community is needed here. It's not just about me and my views on God. He says, trust in him at all times, O people. Pour out your hearts before him. God is our shelter. He's inviting other people into his prayers, into his frustrations there. He hasn't kept it all personal. He's using his own personal metaphors. He's using his own experiences. And yet he's inviting the community and says, he's not my shelter. He is our shelter. God will be here for us. And yet he's putting that in a way that makes sense for him, that's personal. He's sharing, I think, from his own knowledge of God. I just think it's a neat, quick little way of inviting the community into what he's doing, using kind of his own frustration, his own reminders to himself, to just be a teacher, to invite other people into that. We're going to see him shift kind of one more time. And I think this time he starts talking with only breath is humankind. The sons of man are a lie. I think that there's kind of two things going on here. One is, yes, he's kind of mocking the techniques. He's mocking the supposed strength of the people who are after him. But I think there's some more kind of self-talk and talk to the community as well. He's saying, don't trust the things that they're doing. Don't trust in these things that are apparently good and that work well. It's not God's ways. It's not what you should be trusting, right? He says, only breath, humankind. The sons of man are a lie. On the scales altogether, they weigh less than a breath. Don't trust in oppression, and of theft have no illusions. Though it bear fruit of wealth, set not your heart on it. You could fill in a lot of blanks there, right? Well, maybe oppression and theft, maybe they do get you some more stuff. Maybe they do appear to work out in the short run. I think there's a particularly good warning there for us as Americans. We tend to value kind of instrumentalism, what works, pretty highly, right? A lot of the time we say, I'm not sure that what you're talking about is doing right. And a lot of people just kind of scoff and say, yeah, but it works. Who cares if it's right? We like to get the job done. And I think he's telling both himself, the community, and throwing it in the face of these people. Like, look, you look successful right now. This may be working at the moment. But again, oh my soul, souls of my brothers in the community, my sisters in the community. Those things are not who we are. Those are not things we trust in God. God is going to be the one that comes through for us. What you're talking about is foolish. It's short-sighted. And so the question, of course, is for us is why do we do it so much of the time? Why do we spend so much time and energy trusting in other things, hoping other things are going to work out? We know better. We need to know better in our heart of hearts again. And then verse 12 at the very end, we kind of get this other main point that he's wanting to make, that he's telling himself, that he's telling other people in tough circumstances. One thing God has spoken, two things have I heard. And that's kind of an old Hebrew way of highlighting something, of making sure you pay attention. One thing, two things. You see that a lot in the Proverbs. But basically, it's like putting a big black underline under it, or putting a highlighter over this next thing he's going to say. that despite everything else you've seen, that strength is but God's, and yours, Master, is kindness. And so I think this here is the kind of classic important 1-2 punch from trusting God, the Old Testament. He says, okay, God is strong enough and powerful enough to do something about it. But not just that, yours, Master, is kindness, is mercy, is the desire to do something about it. God is powerful enough to handle whatever is thrown at us in life. And he desires to help us and protect us and take care of us. I think we're used to seeing people out there that have 1 or 2 of those, right? There's a lot of powerful people out there, but we get kind of cynical, suspecting that they actually want to help us. What are you actually up to? And I think there's a lot of really well-meaning people out there. I love you and I wish I could take care of you, but they don't have the expertise, they don't have the power, they don't have the influence, blah, 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 right? And I think we're being reminded that there is something really unique about God. He has the power to come through, and he desires to. His is kindness, his is mercy, his is loving kindness, all those such important words. Again, not hopefully real jarring or surprising theological insights into God's character, but so, so important if our souls are going to trust in him in all circumstances. God has the power to help, and God desires to help. And there's this last little phrase which actually drops out of poetry in the original language, which most people think it's almost like a little side note. It almost makes me think of, when you're taking notes in college and you scrawl a little thing to remind yourself at the end. He says, "For you requite a man by his deeds." And it seems like that is like what deeds, I thought we've been talking about God's goodness, God's power the whole time, but I think it has to do with this circumstance, right? Is David, who has people backstabbing him, who have people talking about him, a lot of that came down to saying he wasn't a good man, he wasn't a good king, oh, he shouldn't actually be in power, right? And yet there's this little comfort for him at the end. It says, God sees. God knows who I am. He knows my heart. He knows my actions. And in the end, you're going to be the one who vindicates me, not these people who can say anything in the world. And so I think that little kind of throwaway phrase, the coda, is again, David reminding himself of something he really needs to hear here. That at the end of the day, I don't really care what they say or what they think or what they can convince other people of. Because you requite me. You know what I've done. You know my deeds. Again, yours is strength. Yours is the desire to bless. Yours is the desire to help. So therefore, it all circles back around. Therefore, O my soul, quiet yourself. Only in quiet and peace and rest in God is this going to be possible. Any other thoughts on Psalm 62?